Hi, I'm Joe, and this is the Dekahedron RPG Podcast.
Hi everyone, this is Joe, and today I'm joined by a special guest, and that guest is the one, the only, the amazing James. Hi James.
Hello Joe. So what are we going to be talking about today?
So today we are doing a review, and we are doing a review of my favorite RPG adventure of all time, Frontier Forts of Kelnore. Frontier Forts of Kelnore was written by Dave Searing, who is one of the Judges Guild's regulars. So it was published by Judges Guild. It is a adventure supplement for Dungeons & Dragons. That's the original Dungeons & Dragons. And it was originally published in 1978. So Judges Guild used to have this subscription service. It was kind of like the loot boxes of today. They're not loot boxes. What are they? The subscription boxes of today where, you just get something in the mail every month. And it's usually a box of stuff. Only for Judges Guild, it was usually an adventure or a supplement of some sort for D&D, in addition to the Judges Guild Journal, which was kind of a magazine type thing. But so yeah, this was originally part of issue T of the Judges Guild Journal. Later on, they released it on its own. We'll talk about that in a little bit because that comes up on my list a little bit. It's a 32-page, letter-sized, saddle staple binding. It's typical for Judges Guild. Fairly low-quality paper to keep the costs down, stapled in the middle. Like I said, 32 pages. We'll be talking about that as well. I have a little more to say about the intro, but anything to add there, James?
No, the only thing I took away from this, it's more of a make your own dungeon with some foundation, I think.
I like that, and that's a lot of what I like about it. That's a lot of what makes it my favorite. But again, we'll be talking about that because it comes into my list. In general, the background of this module is that in the typical Judges Guild Wilderlands setting, there was a falling empire, the Kingdom of Kelnore. It's kind of analogous to the Roman Empire of medieval Europe, right? There was this great empire. They had advanced building technology, and then they collapsed. Part of this Empire of Kelnore, and I think this was the first mention of Kelnore in the Wilderlands products. It does show up repeatedly later, more and more. But anyway, the conceit is that the emperor at the time liked everything exactly the same, so he had standard plans drawn up for a fortress, and whenever they needed one, in the frontiers of their empire, this is what they would build, was the standard design. I have heard that it was inspired by the Mile fortresses of Hadrian's Wall in England. Not an exact copy by any means. I've been to the Mile castles. I bet you're not surprised. But,
No.
along Hadrian's Wall, which was a great wall dividing the civilized conquered part of Britain from the unconquered rest of the part, every mile there would be a fortress. And they were all pretty much the same in terms of layout. Although the section I visited, I can't remember the name of the area. Dang it. If anybody out there knows, feel free to let me know. Anyway, the section I visited was really neat because it was the field hospital for the wall. I've said it before, when I was in the military, my entire time, both active duty and reserves, was in the medical units. And so it was neat seeing a deployed forward field hospital from 2,000 years ago. Yeah, I don't know. It spoke to me. But then across the modern road and down a bit in some farmer's field, there was a ancient Roman temple. So got to go there. Very, very cool. I love England. I'm getting off topic here. Just like the Roman Empire was long falling by the times of the Middle Ages, the Kelnore Empire had long been falling. And so these forts have fallen into states of disrepair. And some are just ruins, and some are pristine and new because they've been upkept throughout the years or rebuilt or whatever. And so there's a whole section of tables that let you say, what has happened to this castle in the years. Is it in great shape? Is it ruined? What parts are ruined? And there's all these tables that guide you through it. And there's a section up front with mandatory tables, mandatory in air quotes, and then there's a section back with some optional tables if you want even more detail, more randomness. They say that if you do it, it will give you like a 2 to 3 hour adventure for the party to go in and clear out a frontier fort of Kelnore.
I see that, but those tables you're talking about, most of them have dice rolls associated with them, so it's more of a random made adventure.
Well, yeah, otherwise it's not a table, right? It would just be a list. So our normal way of doing reviews here is that we do 2 lists. We do a list of 3 good items and 3 bad items. The 3 things we like the most, the 3 things we like the least, and then, a little general stuff at the end there, opinion-wise. Okay. So, James, your number one good thing, the thing you like the best about this.
It's going to be one of the things that you hate the most. I am a player, so I don't usually create a lot of dungeons or adventures. The one thing I liked is the write-up they did when they were telling you how to use the charts, especially the first one, the Japanese junk landing on the island. The explanation there, I think someone was being very creative. That was one of my favorite things. I tend to like to read those type of things. It's interesting to me.
My number one is the entire concept, is the reusability of it. They gave it enough of a background to make it grounded that you could have the same design and reuse it multiple times. I wouldn't use it for every single adventure. That would get old. But you could run into it every 3 or 4 sessions, and it would still make sense. And there's, going through the tables, there's still enough difference that it's going to be a little different every time. Well, actually, it could be a lot different. But even the layout, even if they know the map, there might be some changes. And that's pretty cool. So the reusability of it and the whole, let me help you create a dungeon, but the heavy lifting is still on you. Or maybe we did the heavy lifting, but you get to do the more creative parts and come up with the story and all that stuff. I love that. I think it's awesome. I think that's great. What's your number 2 thing, sir?
Well, actually, my number 2 thing was what you were going to. I'm going to say they're doing most of the heavy lifting. You just have to roll the dice and have a creative mind to take the results and make it interesting.
My number 2 is, this is going to sound like a little bit of a slam on Judges Guild, and that's not intended, but it might be well-deserved. Judges Guild is great for throwing a bunch of tables at you with no instructions, and you just got to kind of figure out what they're talking about, and you're like, oh, does this mean that I'm supposed to roll on that table now or whatever? But this had very clear instructions. It says, I'm looking at my bad things to make sure I'm not giving. No, the layout's a little wonky. Like the instructions for table 1 have table 2 next to it, and then table 1 doesn't show up for another couple pages, but whatever. But it says you're going to roll on this table, then from that, and then based on this, you're going to want to do these things. And for a Judges Guild product, that is highly unusual, but is awesome. It is great. Even if this wasn't Judges Guild, I would say the instructions of how to use the tables step by step was magnificent and fantastic. So that's my number 2. Sir, your number 3 good thing.
My third thing is they tried to cover everything in here, and I don't think there's a lot more. You could play this adventure without any other books to add to it other than the player's part of it. It seems to be very complete.
So I already talked about my number 3. My number 3, I wrote down, it says same but not the same. The adventures are like, the castle itself is the same, but not exactly always. And the adventures, they'll always be different. And I talked about that under reusability, but I still think it was worth mentioning again. Yeah, and if we're going to say that's too close to the same, then my number 3 great thing will be, it's a nice fast thing when you're like, crud, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have a game in 2 days. Oh, let me make a random frontier fort of Kelnore. Bam. Beautiful. Wonderful. It's awesome. All right. So that was the good. Now the bad. Your number 1, your worst, most hated thing about this. James?
I don't really have anything I hate. But I am going to bring up one thing, but it's more of when this was made. The list of monsters I have are only so-so, but I think there could be a more creative list of monsters.
I will rush to their defense of this one. And you kind of hinted at it when you said the time that it was made.
Right.
When this was written, this was an officially licensed D&D product. They could only use the official D&D monsters. And at the time this was written, that was only the stuff in OD&D. Mm-hmm. The Holmes basic book had not yet, actually, it had just come out. It hadn't been out when they were writing it, but it had just come out. A&D and D hadn't come out yet at all. So yeah, the only monsters they had were from OD&D. So they have a fairly complete listing, I think, for that
the
context.
Time, yeah.
My number one thing I dislike the most is, so this came out in 2 editions. Like I said, the first one was part of issue T of the Judges Guild's journal. The second one was a standalone product, and they have different covers. The one that was part of issue T is just a black and white drawing of the castle, the fort. The second edition, if you will, the one that came out on its own, has a full color cover, and it's a dude on a horse riding through a gateway, and there's like a parapet behind him type thing. That second edition cover irritates me for 2 reasons. One is that the first one, while it was, let's say, crudely drawn, it looked like something that someone did for a high school drafting class. It gave you an image. It said, this is what it looks like. You know, when you're looking at all these maps, this is the 3D view looking at it from like up a hill over in the distance a little bit. And I thought that was very useful. The second edition cover is its color, right? You got to go back to the 1970s when this was in the store. This would be a shrink wrap product, right? They didn't have the open book so you could flip through it. This was in shrink wrap on the shelf, and it has this color cover of this dude on the horse and everything, right? And when you open up the shrink wrap, that color cover is just a piece of paper that's not attached to the booklet itself. It just comes off. It's just something to make it look like it's a color product, and then it's just like the 32-page paper booklet behind that. And I think that's rather sleazy and cheap. It's it's definitely cheap. I mean, Judges Guild was known for low-cost products, and so they tried to keep the costs down. So I know why they did it, because it was much cheaper to print a 1-page flyer than it was to print a 32-page booklet in color.
I believe that's called a switch and bait.
A bait and switch. Let's just call it the old switcheroo. Yeah, I think it's kind of sleazy. In their defense, there are people who think that color pretty artwork is more important, and so they would buy that one more than they would buy the useful drawing that was on the first edition. And not only that, they even redid the cover on the black and white one on the the booklet behind it. So in the second edition, there is no picture of the castle itself at all. Anyway, so that's my number one. Your number two bad thing, sir.
Right now, the only thing I'm not liking, and it's more of a personal preference, within the charts, the insects don't thrill me, and the tables for what you found, it just seems so arbitrary and useless. You find a ladder, you find a plow, you find a barrel. It's just that all this effort, wouldn't you make the finding list a little more interesting?
First of all, what don't you like about the insects table? Is it just that you don't like bugs? Because I know that you don't like bugs.
Yeah, I don't like bugs. And I can't see it in an adventure. Because how much of a nuisance are bugs unless you're doing giant bugs?
Their flavor is just like those random things you found, right? It's just like that table in the appendices of the Dungeon Master's Guide in the first edition where it says random items found and it says like a spike or, it's just this random crap that Gygax put into a D100 table. This is the same thing. Also, these are the optional tables. All those tables in the back of the book, that's only if you want to use them. Well, I guess every table's like that. But even if you're following the instructions, right, you're never actually led there. They never say, go roll on these tables. That's the, here's just some extra stuff we threw in there type stuff. All right. My number 2 bad thing is the examples. And it's not that they're bad examples. It's not that I don't appreciate the examples. It was almost going to be on my good thing list too. The fact that they have examples, because again, Judges Guild is notorious for here's just a list of tables, figure out what to do with them. To have an actual example, this is how we roll things up. This is what it looks like. Here's a little adventure based on it. That's great. That's wonderful. I support that altogether. But then they're like, and here's another one. And then they're like, oh, and here's another one. And at some point, I got to the point where I'm thinking, they're just trying to pad out the page count at this point.
You may be right on the padding of the number of pages, but...
Well, not only that, right? Because like somewhere in the beginning of the book, there is like, what is it, half a page dedicated to a picture of a shield, a coat of arms, which isn't referenced in the text anywhere, right? And then somewhere else there's all this. I'm like, they had 32 pages in mind and they were going to fill that 32 pages, gosh darn it, no matter what.
It is a waste, but it's back to the idea that me and you talk about is what catches the person's eye. Something has to be, you're more literal where I'm more picture oriented. The cover of a book is going to catch me and make me look at it and say, yes, that's something I want to read.
But this isn't the cover, right? This is somewhere inside. And like I said, it was shrink wrapped. Right. So you already have the book at this point. This wasn't to make you buy it. And if you just wanted to show this picture to say, oh, this was the emblem of the Empire of Kelnore, well, that's fine. You could do it in like a little 2-inch by 2-inch square somewhere. It didn't need to be half a page, right? That's it's just filler. It's just to fill space. But in any case, nowhere does it say that was the design of the Empire of Kelnore. It says nothing about it. It's not addressed anywhere. It's just this random picture that they threw in there.
Oh, that's actually 2. I just realized, because I'm looking, the shield that you're talking about is the one with like a wolf face on it.
Which is also not talked about anywhere. Yep. Let's fill up space.
Well, the same thing could be said about the animal table and the insect table. They didn't need the pictures. They could have simply run both of those tables side by side and saved half a page.
There you go. Thank you for agreeing with me. Because everybody knows what an ant looks like. Everybody knows what a spider looks like. Yeah, they were just trying to fill up space. They didn't have enough content for the 32 pages. And it was like, okay, what can we do to drag this out? That's my number 2. Your number 3, sir.
I just didn't like I'm going to agree there should be. I didn't like their trap concept with the tables. Both of us have talked about it before. Who's going to put a trap in their own castle to make it difficult to walk around the place? A couple of traps in certain locations, yes, but through the whole place, no. So the trap list is sort of a minor peeve for me.
Yeah, but it doesn't say you put one of these traps everywhere in every place, right? It says if you get a trap result on table, I think it's like table 17.
Well, I'm going to go on that first adventure that they write up. They basically have, where they have their prisoners, they have traps all over the bottom stack, the catacombs. They have a couple of traps there where they have their people walking through it. So it's in the example that did it.
I would argue that may make sense, because if it's where you're keeping prisoners, then you might want traps around there to prevent the prisoners from escaping. Kind of like Alcatraz Island used all of San Francisco Bay as a big trap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just the way they wrote up the traps. It seems like, again, to me, I'm going to say a page filler.
I actually found that trap table useful, because you're saying, okay, I want a trap. What type of trap do I want? And actually, I'm pretty sure that this comes right out of, what's that other product? It's reprinted again in Dungeon Master's a reference thing.
Sure.
But in term, it came from somewhere else first. Looking at the tables, yeah, I've seen this before in that other product. But still, it's not saying put this everywhere willy-nilly. It's saying if you need a trap, here's a quick way to generate one so you're not having the same trap every time. So maybe you just want one in the corner of the storeroom over there. Well, here you go. And that way, it's not like, oh, you know, this is Ralph. Ralph's the DM. Ralph always has a 10-foot pit with stakes at the bottom, and 1 in 6 are poisoned. Right? It gives you some variety there, and I think it's a good table. I think you just don't like traps in general, and your complaint was putting them willy-nilly, and nowhere in there does it say to put them willy-nilly. Although using the table I was talking about, they do show up in about 30% of the rooms if you're going to use that table. Again, that's not, if you follow the sequence in the front of the book where it says this is how to do things, it never says use that table. That's just if you want to just go off and do your own thing, instead of going through the table sequence in the front of the book, then you would end up there. But anyway, all right.
And your third?
My third is it's a thing of the time. It's there's typos in there. Every time I see typos, that will probably show up on my list because they really irritate me. They really draw me out, and you know, it's just a thing. Especially back in the 70s, because you didn't have editors, you didn't have word processors, you didn't have all that. In fact, this one's obvious that it's not word processors, right? This is obviously someone typed this up on a page and sent it off to the printer, right?
This does not look like it was done on a computer. It looks like someone physically typed it all.
All right, so that's our 3 good. That's our 3 bad. Your overall impression, sir?
Well, I like the overall look of it or the use of it. It makes me think of the books where you used to do your own adventures.
All right, yeah, the choose your own adventure books, yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think of that to a point. Just maybe a cousin to it, for lack of a better word to use.
All right, and thumbs up, thumbs down?
For that price of $3, definitely a thumb up.
My overall opinion, you've already know because I've said it in multiple episodes. This is my favorite D&D adventure book ever. Better than anything TSR ever published. But that is because I'm very much a do-it-myself kind of guy. I much rather have this little, here's a toolkit to go and build this thing, rather than here is a book where everything's already been decided for you and you have you always have creative input, but you have very limited creative input. So I like that. I love that. The design itself is very down to earth. It's very realistic. No matter the fantasy level of your campaign, this works. It's not like, how come we have 7 miles of dungeon beneath this town? Who dug all that? Where did that come from? This is a fort that was built probably about 1,000 years ago. It's realistic. You could say, yes, it was built by people, but according to this standardized set of plans. Or you could say that in a high magical thing, the high wizards of Kelnore invented these magical artifacts, much like Leomund's tiny hut that you could just put down when you grow, only it was this little fortress and you put it down and grow. Or maybe it was the various parts of it and you'd have to assemble the parts and then it would grow. And that'd be kind of cool because then the adventurers could find a tower, like somewhere in one of them, a little tower, and they could put it somewhere and then have their own little tower. That'd be a kind of cool little thing. Anyway, but that would be for a very high fantasy type thing. It works for high and low. The layout of the fort itself is very simple, but it's very deadly. If you were to actually fill this with just soldiers and have the players try to breach it, they better be using stealth, because the way this is laid out, there are arrow holes all over the place. And even if they breach the walls, they end up in this courtyard where, again, there are arrow slits and parapets all around them. And they are just going to be sitting ducks for the archers. I took this design and I built it in Minecraft. James walked around it a little bit. Did you like that?
I did like it. The one thing, I don't know if it Minecraft or if it was the design, I was having problems finding the stairs up and down when I was walking through Minecraft. So I don't know if it was because of Minecraft, my mind just wasn't seeing the stairs in it, or if it was a very good design and they were well hidden in it. That's hard to say one way or the other.
Yeah, I've done this with a few things. There's a couple adventures I found in like older editions of Dungeon Magazine where, I've taken the map and I've just made them out in Minecraft to see what they look like to the naked eye. It's just a cool design. It's very down to earth. It's very realistic. The reusability of it, you get to use this over and over again. And just like in Traveler, where it's fun to sit down and just generate a character, it's fun to sit down with these tables and just generate a Frontier 4 and come up with a little backstory behind it. There's a couple things I would tweak here and there, but that's with every product. That's every GM ever with every product ever. And a lot of it you could boil down to, they might have even been thinking that, but when you add all that text in, you're adding more and more pages, although they did have pages to work with on this one, that's for sure. But yeah, again, big thumbs up from me. I love this product. I think it is awesome. I want to remake this product, much like we have the retro clones of all the various games. I would love to do a retro clone of this, come up with a new map design. I have one roughly in my head, but all the insides parts I need other minds for. I would love to get a little team together that could create a modernized version of this, seeing that this one is out of print and hard to find. But yeah, I love it. Big thumbs up.
That would be an interesting project. I wonder how much you would have to change so Judges Guild wouldn't come out to you. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, that company is closed now.
No.
Past the copyright time frame?
So copyright in the United States is the life of the author plus 95 years. So 95 years after Dave Serling dies, this will be available. As far as I know, he's still alive, but even if he's not, we still have close to 100 years to go. Secondly, Judges Guild is still around. It's being run by Bob Bledsoe's son. I get that relationship confused. The concept is not copyrightable. What is copyrightable is the actual execution, which is why my map that I have in my mind is completely different. It's more of a castle than a fort. It's 4 towers instead of the 1, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the map is completely different. And then the way I would do the insides are also different. So, yeah. James, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me, Joe. And audience, thank you for coming. Please come back for the next episode.
Yeah, everyone, thanks. Thanks for listening. Do come back. We definitely enjoy having you listen to us. Do send us feedback. Have you played Frontier Forts of Kelnore? Let me know what you thought about it. Are you interested in playing it? I am going to do a follow-up episode. It's going to be a solo episode, of course, where I'm going to go through the tables. I'm going to generate a castle and talk about it as I do it. I've done it once before on a blog post. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I'll put a link to this product, probably the Wikipedia page in the show notes. Maybe I'll also start a discussion about it on the Play web forums at www.dekahedron.com/boards. But like I said, send us feedback. Let me know what you thought of the episode, what you think of this product. If you'd be interested in playing the product, if you're having all that fun stuff. Feedback at dekahedron.com. That's the email address. The phone number is in the outro music that you are probably hearing right now. It is in the show notes below, or all that information and more can be found at www.dekahedron.com. Thanks for listening, and until next week, happy gaming, happy life. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Dekahedron RPG Cast. We'd love to hear from you. You can leave us a voice message by calling 562-774-2278. That's 562-RPG-CAST. Or by visiting sayhi.chat/dekahedron. You can also email us at feedback@dekahedron.com. Links are in the show notes. For more information, visit dekahedron.com. Remember that Dekahedron is spelled with a K. Music is by Kevin MacLeod. Logos by Design Cat. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep those dice rolling.
Hold on, keep recording.
Oh.
Now, hopefully we can talk Joe into actually running an adventure for some of our listeners if we get the right number of people to respond to this.